Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wealth Preservation Podcast. I am Mark Seither. I've got my sidekick here, Josh Saunders.
Hello, everybody. How are we doing today? We're having a really fun episode. Mark, last episode we got to talk about agriculture and wine, so that was not bad.
Yes.
I mean, I know you're kind of a beer
essentially
guy.
Wine and cheese. That was our last episode, and how to pass that wine and cheese
to the next generation.
Yes.
Well, you're kind of a beer guy, so I know it was kind of a hard topic for you.
Yeah. Well, actually, a little teaser. We do have a podcast coming up in the next couple weeks that will be hosted at Monk Cellar. So
That's true.
We got beer.
Stay tuned for that one. We do. We're going to be talking all about microbrews.
Yes.
And the business and tax ramifications of those things. Yeah. So not just about beer.
We did want to bring back Jeff Stevens to do a little bit more, because we talked about some of the planning, but we wanted to get a little bit more granular and some of the, because there's different things, different strategies, meant for different things. And so he is kind of the guru, or is the guru, who's going to let us know, like, hey, what are some of these acronyms? What do they mean? What do they mean for the families? And kind of give us a little bit more detail on that. So we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, we want to really get into how they're used, and, because, one item does not solve all problems. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you both.
Yeah. So if you want to know some of Jeff's background, go watch the previous episode. It's all there. He went to UCLA a lot. So that's the short version. There we go. That's it.
In a nutshell.
Was it with you're with GVM Law, correct?
GVM Law. That's right.
And you were over in Napa for a while, so that's kind of why we went down the wine tangent last episode.
Yep. Napa office and now a Roseville office.
Now you heads up.
Get to work out.
Partner, right? At Roseville
that's
office.
Right.
Perfect. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of dive into some of these really high level planning techniques that GVM specializes in, and we're going to try and break down some of the confusing acronyms. So if you ever are talking to an attorney and they're talking to you about trust planning or a trust, please don't let your eyes glaze over and go, this isn't important. This is a very important topic because these different trust structures can solve very important issues for you and your family. So, and as always, Jeff, like we talked about last time, when is the best time to do planning?
The best time to do planning is soon.
Yes.
Early.
Yes. The sooner the better, right?
Get out in front of it.
Yes, absolutely. So, Jeff, kind of give us a background of what kind of GVM, just a short brief about GVM Law, and then we'll kind of kick off from there.
Okay, thank you. GVM Law, business planning, estate planning, tax planning, with some employment and litigation support also.
Okay.
We help a lot of business owners and families with their legal needs in this regard. I get to focus on the trust, tax, estate work.
Perfect.
And I'm looking forward to making a very non-boring, exciting trust podcast with you guys.
And just for the listeners, we do know that this can be kind of a dry topic, so we are going to try to interject some good stories and make it as interesting as possible. But usually talking about trust is not, this doesn't make usually Saturday Night Live.
And with the stories, not Saturday Night Live, we're not going to have any Debbie Downers in here.
Yeah. Wah, wah.
With the stories, because I know the way I learn is usually allegorical. So when I hear something play out, I'm like, that makes sense now. Because when I just hear like, there's the trustee here and there's this person, that's where my eyes glaze over. So we are going to make sure we have those really good stories.
Who are some of those parties? Absolutely. So Jeff, let's kind of kick into it. So what are some examples of some trust structures that GVM and that you kind of specialize in, and what do they do? So I know there's a whole laundry list and an alphabet soup of ones, but we'll try and break those down.
Yeah, and maybe the very first thing to clarify is in California, most people, when they think estate planning, they're talking about what I would consider, or we consider, like foundational plans, right? Okay. So this is a revocable trust, right? A trust that can be changed anytime.
Yep.
Your will, your powers of attorney. That's all estate planning, and that's foundational package, right? The things we're talking about today don't replace those. You still need all of that, and lots of estate planning attorney firms do those things,
right? Yeah.
And so what we try to offer is additional techniques. So I'm not talking about the revocable trust. A lot of the plans we do center on an irrevocable trust, and maybe some business entities tied in with those.
Right.
The concept here with an irrevocable trust is you're doing some sort of transfer today,
right,
for estate tax purposes, where for income tax or property taxes, it might be neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the overall what you're trying to hit with these techniques. And so maybe the most prevalent and one we use the most is something called a grantor trust, an irrevocable grantor trust. And
the acronym for that is what, an IDGT, right?
yeah,
Is that
sometimes called an IDGT, which
Okay.
stands for Intentionally Defective Grantor Trust.
Oh, that's
And
super nerdy. That's good nerdy stuff.
it
right
is
there.
nerdy,
Yeah.
and defective sounds like there's a problem with the trust. In this case,
Only a lawyer would sell you, be like, hey, I'm selling you something defective that I'm gonna have to fix later. That's why lawyers are awesome.
And here's my bill.
And here's my bill. Yeah.
yeah, the defective grantor. It says it in the name, right?
Yeah.
But what this is designed, name notwithstanding, is you're trying to take advantage of a difference in the tax code between estate taxes
Okay.
and income taxes.
Gotcha.
And when is an asset in a trust considered owned by the person for estate taxes and income tax
Okay.
purposes? And how it works is there's a way and a mechanism here where a person can transfer an asset to a trust, and it, once transferred, won't be counted against them anymore for estate tax purposes. But for income tax purposes, they still pay income tax the same way.
Right.
And they're allowed, because of that grantor trust status. A grantor trust is a trust where income tax, the grantor, the creator of the trust, is still the taxpayer.
Sure. Okay.
That's what a grantor trust means.
Yep.
And so by making this irrevocable trust a grantor trust, instead of just giving assets to the trust, the creator of the trust can also sell assets to the trust.
Okay.
And in that way, hey, that opens up the playbook now. So a business owner, instead of just creating an irrevocable trust and giving all their assets to
Which
it,
they don't like to do because
which
business owners are control freaks.
Turns
in a good way.
out-
That's not a bad term. A control freak is, that's just, they're good at what they do and they like to control it.
control freak, yeah, maybe, but it turns out business owners like their business.
Sure.
And they are using the proceeds for their own livelihood,
Sure.
right? They need some of the benefit. They can't maybe,
Yeah.
they don't want to, or they can't just give it away.
Sure.
Right? But they want to get some of the estate tax benefits as if they did give it away.
Yeah.
And so that's where we get this kind of structure. So instead of just giving the asset to this irrevocable trust, they'll sell it.
Okay.
And because it's a sale to a grantor trust, it's not recognized for income tax purposes. So you can sell it without recognizing capital gains.
Okay.
The trust can make interest payments on a promissory note to you without causing additional income to
Right.
you.
Sure.
It's neutral for income tax purposes. You pay income tax the same way you did before.
Yeah.
But for estate tax purposes, you've transferred an asset at today's value, and if it appreciates in value at the time of your death, it's not includable in your estate.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
No,
and so that's kind of the overall concept.
Okay.
And so we can get into an example and
Yeah.
hypotheticals about it. but-
Sure.
and before the example, I just because you are selling it and everything, and so I just want everyone to know at home. So what does the appraisal process look like? Because I'm sure as a business owner, you can't just say like, "Sweet, I'm going to sell it to myself for $20 million." Like $20 million, and it's really not
Right.
worth that. So what's just the appropriate way of appraising that and making sure that sale takes place?
And so maybe the best way to explain that part of it is with this kind of transaction, what you're looking to when you're planning for it is the eventual, I guess, showcase of it is going to be on a gift tax return
Okay.
if it's a transfer made during life, or an estate tax return at transfers at death, right?
Right.
And so when you're describing transfers, so say in this example, client's making this irrevocable trust and is going to move their business interests to it. They're going to disclose it the following year on a gift tax return.
Sure.
And that's where you get,
Got it.
how do you justify the value in the transaction? Because what you're telling the IRS is, I've moved this asset, say it's $10 million business, to this trust. I've taken back a promissory note for $9 million and made a gift of the difference.
Okay.
You're telling the IRS, like, yeah, that was, these are the values we used. And so you got to appraise it. You get a business valuation or real property appraisals. And, we help find, the qualified appraisers and work with them also. But there's definitely a component there where you want to, I guess, give the IRS enough to show that it's legitimate and, give them what they're expecting to see.
Sure.
Right? If you come in there on a gift tax return with just sort of like off the cuff, back of the
Numbers,
napkin sort of numbers, that might invite some more
Scrutiny.
interest.
Yeah.
So the IRS does care. Okay, just wanted to make
The
sure.
IRS cares, it turns out. And
Yeah.
our experience has been, in any inquiries is, they're reasonable, but I mean, just show them, like, document it and do it, and there's a right way to do it, and
Yeah. Hang on.
kind of more aggressive ways to do it.
So as you're saying, as far as that, the IDGT. So let's go an example. What is it? What would be a scenario where this would be used, and why would a family or or
Sure.
the estate planners want to use it?
Thank you. So, and you talked about beer and wine already, so I'll do a whiskey distillery.
Okay.
Here in.
Did you bring some to share or no?
I like whiskey
Turns
too.
out-
yeah,
yeah,
I don't discriminate.
Great. So this is actually one. It was actually a label from Old World Eastern Europe.
Okay.
That, has kind of stayed in multi generations. But anyway, in this example, created an irrevocable trust for. This was one that father created for the benefit, a trust for his spouse and for children. Okay, moves over the assets of the business, the underlying property, and again, because he didn't just give it to the trust, because he sold a portion of it, that trust now will pay him back over time, over the years. So his take-home cash is, for the next foreseeable future, the same.
The same.
He's
Gotcha.
still receiving the money that the distillery earns.
So his lifestyle didn't change a whole bunch, or at all?
Lifestyle,
Yeah.
day-to-day life,
Yeah.
pretty much the
It's
same.
Yeah.
As far as control, he used to be, the owner and can just do literally whatever he wants. He still has the game you play, I guess, for lack of a better word, or the positions you need to take. You're telling the IRS that, look, for estate tax purposes, I've made a transfer. I don't own this anymore.
Okay.
So the control of it, you have to build it in. So maybe you structure it where you move non-voting rights
Sure. Yeah.
to this type of trust and you retain voting rights. Or you have different officers or methods of electing officers or trustees in a way that you can maintain some indirect level of control.
Sure.
There's a lot of details that go into that. But at the end of the day,
You can't just download that off the internet.
it's not just a form. you
I
just
think there's a
print
company
off.
called Zoom Legal or something like that where you can grab that.
Yeah, I really don't know much about that, but this is one. It would be detail specific,
Right.
But if you ask the clients, when it comes down to it, they want to know, well, what does their cash flow look like, and what does the control and longevity of the business look like, right? And if you can hit both of those things satisfactorily to the client, they might as well structure it in a way that starts saving estate taxes.
Sure.
So again, there's a lot of details about it. There's, this gets more technical maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of options you can do, and that's just one example.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So yeah, that's the grantor trust. Other techniques or?
Yeah. So that's kind of, is there another spin on that? Do you have another example of that one? That was a really good one, but do you have another example?
Yeah. Sure. A construction company, very large, very, so since 2011, construction has just been
crazy,
going crazy
right.
in this area, right? And the affiliated industries,
sure.
construction, have also done very well.
Yeah.
So client created in 2000, just after 2010. So Irrevocable Trust moved shares of corporation to it. Now, great, corporation's worth much more than it was,
right.
Back then, right? The valuation is probably at least twice what it was, right? But because he structured it in a way, hey, the shares are no longer owned by me. They're owned by this irrevocable trust. They're not going to be counted against him for estate tax purposes when he passes away.
Right.
Again, because of the sale transaction, he's been able to retain benefit from there.
Yeah. So you're basically, for the audience, you're basically taking that cost when it's low, transferring when it's low, and then it gets to expand basically outside of that person's estate, right?
That's exactly right.
So they basically get the benefit of the growth, but not to them personally, where they would be tax liable for that.
It's exactly right.
Correct. Okay.
And that's one of the reasons it's good to start early. And even if, say there's a business where there's expectation or hope for a lot of appreciation,
yeah.
right? It might make sense to structure it inside an irrevocable trust. Now, even though you might not be subject to estate tax today, if it were to hit, you put it in there because you're looking toward the future. Yeah. And so you might as well let the appreciation grow in there.
Okay, perfect. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's an IDGT. What does that stand for? What is that acronym?
That's intentionally defective grantor trust.
Perfect.
Sometimes just called an irrevocable grantor trust.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So for all of our listeners, there you go.
Yeah.
If you hear somebody mention that, you'll now know what that is.
It's defective, but it's intentionally
defective.
So you don't want a non-intentionally defective.
That's true.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly defective trust.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where the lawyers really make money.
Yes.
That's not what you want to say.
We joke here with the attorneys, people. We joke.
So that was, that was awesome on the IDGT side. But, I know sometimes we've run into people who just have extremely unique situations, and we've, met with some people who are like, hey, there's this very obscure thing that doesn't work for 99.999% of people, but it worked for us. Have you guys run into that where you're like, hey, we've done 3 of these in our entire existence, but you happen to be a good fit? Like, what are some of those really unique scenarios?
Okay. So that's a good question. So we actually did one this year that was, it's called a beneficiary defective trust. And so a similar concept to what we just talked about, but in this case, instead of the creator of the trust being treated as the owner for income tax purposes, the beneficiary of the trust is. Yeah,
exactly. Beat it. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
The Michael Jackson trust.
There you go.
Sorry. Bad joke. Bad joke. We can cut that.
Just beat it. I got it. I got it. Yeah. Sorry.
I think we should keep that in.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But for this particular client, like you said, it doesn't come up a lot because usually the creator of the trust is the one who, they're okay maybe funding the trust with their business, and they can retain that cash flow and control to a level that's satisfactory to them.
Right.
This client, though, so this is a younger client. She doesn't have children of her own, but she has a successful healthcare and skincare business.
Mark, you should probably look that up. Yes.
Yeah, she could probably help.
Yeah.
Well, anyone listening to the podcast is going to be like, he must be hideous.
Face for radio. Good one, Aaron.
But anyway, in this example, it wasn't right for her to fund the trust. She wanted to be the beneficiary of this trust that was going to hold the business. Okay. So in this example, she had her mother created the trust, funded it with a small nominal amount, not nominal, but a minor amount compared to the value of the business.
Right.
And under certain provisions of the tax code, the beneficiary, the initial client, became the grantor of the trust and is responsible for the income taxes of it. So a little bit of a variation and a twist on that. Definitely not right for every client.
Yeah.
For clients where it's just a non-starter that they're going to give the asset to a trust and not be the beneficiary, this is an option where, hey, business owner, you can be the beneficiary of these trust. It's held for you. You are the one beneficiary of all these business assets.
Gotcha. So that allowed her to get all the benefit of it, but also it was really avoiding some future estate tax or income tax, or what was it really avoiding to use that BDIT type structure?
Right. So similar concept is now once beneficiary sold the business to that trust.
Okay.
Right. The appreciation and the growth of that. She's very young. I mean, she's in her early 30s.
Okay.
Right. Who knows what the estate tax is going to look like there, but she knows the business is going to grow in value.
Yeah.
Okay. So get established values today with an appraiser, put it inside, sell it to this trust.
Yeah.
It's now outside of her taxable estate.
Okay.
And she is going to retain promissory note payments from it. And she's also the beneficiary of the trust.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of a little spin on that, but it's for, in this example, an owner who simply, they had to be the beneficiary. They weren't going to give it away to a trust where they don't have any kids of their own. Right.
Sure.
There's no one to make the trust for. She had to be the beneficiary.
Okay.
So that's one example. That's an option.
Gotcha.
And these trusts, sometimes people have heard of Grats or QPRTs. And
explain before you go. Explain what those are.
Yep.
A GRAT is
GRAT stands for Grantor Retained Annuity Trust.
Okay.
And the concept here is grantor moves assets into a trust and retains, that's grantor retains, the right to receive annuity payments or payments every year from the trust for a certain amount of time.
Gotcha. Okay.
And a QPRT is called a qualified personal residence trust, which is a similar concept where grantor moves their house and retains the right to live there for a certain number of years.
Gotcha.
Those are both called retained interests trusts.
Okay.
And conceptually, it's different than the IDGT that we just talked about because there's no retained interest with an IDGT, right?
Okay.
The only way the grantor, the creator, gets anything back is through the promissory note payments, right?
Gotcha.
So it's an important to structure the sale correctly.
So for the QPRT, we've seen those used in some asset protection situations because that technically takes something else owns that residence now. The downside there is obviously if it has any sort of loans on or anything, you don't get the the SALT deductions, the state and local taxes, and you don't get your interest payment deductions. Correct?
Yep, right. So there's some income tax issues with doing that. We don't see as many QPRTs, or we don't really do as many GRATs either, because if a person dies, so say it's a 10-year GRAT, I put in, assets into this GRAT, I'm going to retain the right to receive payments for say 10 years.
Right.
If I die during that 10-year period, all the assets are now included in my estate of that trust. I have to survive that retained interest period.
Okay, so that could come back and bite you a little bit.
You're trying to, I guess you're trying to play like, hey, I want to outlive this thing, but then wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so we find more success and flexibility with the IDGT, where from day one, that there's no survivorship period, right?
Okay.
Like from the moment that trust is funded, those assets are away and out of my estate. I still have a promissory note in my estate, but that is going to be paid off over time. And so years go on, that note gets smaller and smaller.
Right.
So my estate is shrinking.
So Jeff, on all these structures, you've mentioned promissory notes on multiple occasions. Like,
Sure.
Why is that important and powerful? I don't think, for those of our listeners, like, the best creditor that you would ever want to have would be yourself or something you control. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, that's probably one of the best. I want to owe myself money. I mean, that's like the best way. If you could owe yourself money, you'd want to be like to yourself. So why do you use those promissory note structures to set that up?
Yeah, thank you. So the promissory note in this case, so the funding of an IDGT or the sale to the IDGT is it's a way to document like a legitimate liability of that trust.
Sure.
And that's important because, so going back to that example, if I have a business I think is worth $10 million and I want to move it to the trust, maybe make a gift of $1 million and take back a note for $9 million.
Yeah.
I say take back a note is I want to document and make sure the trust is actually obligated to pay that.
Sure.
So in addition to the note, I'll make sure there's security given in the assets that were sold, and in any other assets that are in the trust.
Right.
And why that's important is because, again, when we report this transaction on the gift tax return, we want to show that yes, that $9 million, I gave $9 million of the business, but I got back a $9 million note. That's equal value. That's a non-gift moment.
Okay.
And the promissory note helps document that. And maybe more simply, a promissory note is the document that just shows the obligation to pay and on what terms.
Yeah.
Right. And so these can be structured as amortizing over time, right? Over a certain number of years, kind of like a mortgage.
Sure.
Or it could be maybe interest only and then with a balloon payment at the end.
Gotcha.
And kind of as an aside to these, it's a really favorable time to do these kind of transactions because interest rates are so low.
Gotcha.
When you fund a trust and sell to a trust now, the interest payment is tiny compared to what it has been historically. Okay. So anyway, a great time to do
for tax purposes. It helps on lots of levels.
Yeah. And when you're gifting that, so now you have a $9 million note and it's supposed to pay you back with interest. Like who's in charge of making sure that gift in there is still growing enough to where it can, because, or on the flip side, have you run into those situations where maybe there's like a $9 million gift and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, and then that tanks and we can't make those interest payments? I mean, is that ever a factor or are there ways to hedge that?
So I guess it would be a factor, right? So here's how you address it though, is the trustee of the trust would be in charge of making investments and making the payments to the creator of the trust, right? That trustee is, initially decided by the grantor. Whoever created the trust will decide who the trustee is. One of the roles in a trust that we provide for is called a trust protector. And this is a third party that the creator of the trust nominates. And that trust protector can help oversee the trust and have some limited powers over it. One of them could be maybe replace a trustee that's not operating correctly, and replace it with someone who will do a better job on investments and make the note payments as needed. And if things just really tank and the assets of the trust are not as valuable as they once were and can't afford it, you can always make what's called an in-kind payment. So, hey, the trust didn't make enough money to actually pay you cash, but we can always give back some of the stock in satisfaction of that obligation.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you run into that? Because I'm not sure. I guess everyone's different. Every situation is different. But do you run into that where someone's like, hey, my fraternity brother, I want him to be my trustee, and you're like, maybe we should go with someone else? Or, I mean, is that actually a good option from time to time?
I guess it depends on that fraternity brother.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's appropriate to get like a professional fiduciary or a trust company, but a lot of times, at least the business owners we've dealt with, they want to keep things close, right? And they're sensitive to privacy, and so they'll have oftentimes their own trusted group of colleagues and friends that they can usually rely on for something like that. And really a trustee, I mean, it sounds stupid, but, someone that you trust might be the most important thing because they can always hire, advisors for the technical knowledge. And, so you get the right person that's wise and can make decisions that you trust with it, and then, bring on the expertise as needed.
Sure. Yeah. That probably makes sense.
Yeah.
So can we kind of dive into an example of a,
Sure.
A GRAT?
Yeah.
So give us a scenario, like kind of set up the family scenario, the family situation, and how that would be used. Sure.
For a GRAT in particular?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you might be facing some of the same considerations that you would for the IDGT, where you're maybe hoping that, let's take a portfolio of securities in this example, right? You think there's going to be appreciation, and you want to do some estate tax planning. So you might structure it, let's say take a 5-year GRAT. I put, let's say, $1 million in, just for simple math, right? The right to use that money to retain those payments for 5 years is going to be something, let's say it's worth $800,000, right?
Okay.
So my annuity payments are coming back for 5 years. The actuarial value of those payments, that income stream, is $800,000.
Okay.
So what's happened is when I put $1 million into that trust, I've only made a net gift of $200,000, right?
Okay.
The initial $1 million that goes in there, subtract out the value of the annuity payments that I've retained,
right?
The trust is going to pay me, leaves $200,000. So what happens is, hey, interest rates are low now. The GRAT doesn't. I can structure this so the GRAT only has to make small
payments to you.
Payments.
Yep.
And I hope that the market outperforms that. And so at the end, whatever's left in the trust is now for my children or whoever I created the GRAT for, and hopefully is worth more than $1 million.
Gotcha.
So I've only used $200,000 of my gift exemption, right? Which again, the exemption now is very high now. It's $11 million plus for a person.
Yep.
Each spouse can pass that. But anytime you make a gift, you're chipping into that. Right. And so being able to move $1 million of value, I get to kind of live off it while I still need to for these 5 years.
And only use $2,000.
I only use $200,000 of my exemption.
Gotcha.
And anything that's left over.
And then at the end of the day, I could have given my my kids $1.6 million depending on how well it did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Depending on the appreciation.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you move that out of your estate. Yeah, 200. I know the percentage of it. I'm back of the hand math at 200,000 versus 1.5 million. That's a good deal.
Yeah, and if I had waited until then, at the end of the 5 years to make the gift, I'd be making a gift of 1.5 million of my exemption, rather than 200,000.
Gotcha. That totally makes sense.
And just for clarification, in doing that, like when the person actually receives like the 1.5 million, that's not reported on their like income, right?
So that can be a grantor trust also. So the income tax neutral.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
This is an estate tax savings vehicle.
Got it.
Right?
Perfect. Yeah.
So at least it's not worse for income taxes.
Right.
At least neutral. And then
neutral. Yeah.
Hey, we're doing this other stuff.
CPAs like to hear neutral because that means they don't have to do any weird planning for it. They're not get blamed for getting another tax. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to kind of shift the conversation. So those were all kind of estate and gift estate planning, tax planning, trust and structures, the IDGT, the BDIT, the QPRT. But now it's shifting to something a little more exciting, or at least we think on our side, because Mark, we're all very charitably minded here, and I know lots of people are. So let's talk about some of the charitable planning that can be done. These are very powerful structures that you can set up for not only for taxes, but you're also really blessing some really great charities and people out there. So it's kind of this dual benefit of, hey, I'm getting a great tax reduction, but I'm also supporting the things that I believe in as a person. So let's kind of talk into what some of those charitable planning items are.
Sure. Thank you. So charitable planning really can come into play both during life and at death.
Right.
So I'll even start with the at death thing. So sometimes estate tax, you've done your planning, you've passed, person passes away and they still have some otherwise would have had some estate tax payable, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes what we see is in the plan drafted, some amount, instead of just going to maybe children or heirs at that time, might go into something that's called a charitable lead trust.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that for a second. So a charitable lead trust and charitable remainder trust are two type of charitable trusts.
Right.
And we talked about Grats a moment ago, where there's a stream of annuities or a stream of payments, and then someone else gets whatever's left.
Sure.
So in a charitable lead trust, assets go into a trust and the charity receives a stream of payments and then someone else gets it. A charitable remainder trust is someone gets the payments and then the charity gets it.
Okay.
So kind of two sides of the same coin there.
Yep.
So sometimes what you'll see is for estate tax mitigation, right? You can get a charitable deduction, which would reduce the amount of estate tax paid by structuring some of the assets to pass through a charitable lead trust where, eventually you want it to go to heirs, but maybe for 7 years or 10 years or something, charity gets to use it, right? For that intervening time, and you get a charitable deduction against the estate.
Yep.
Maybe it's assets that the kids won't need eventually, or won't need immediately, but eventually they will. So you might as well set it aside for charity for a few years, and you could get an estate tax deduction there.
Perfect.
And those techniques can also be used during life. So maybe a charitable remainder trust, client enjoys the livelihood and the income streams. They don't want to part with it now, but they could use a income tax deduction for making a gift to charity. So similar with a GRAT, $1 million goes into the trust, client retains maybe $800,000 of
income from
income.
it.
So you've made a gift to charity of $200,000, and that leads to an income tax deduction also.
It can be huge for some people when you're getting crushed in taxes in California.
And one thing always with charitable planning is if you can maybe structure it where, so say you have an assets that you have built-in gain, you can put it inside this type of trust perhaps, and then have a sale event. And charitable trusts wouldn't recognize gain the same way, so it could be an income tax advantage also.
And we've had this conversation around here multiple times, but you get to choose who your charity is. One of them is the IRS, right? I mean that they're going to get some, or that money came. Everybody always thinks that I'm giving away money and I am sending money to the IRS. You can choose to send that money to somebody else. That money has to go somewhere, so you get to choose. I can go to charity or I can go to IRS. I hope that people would choose charity.
And
another the IRS doesn't need your money. So
right.
Well, they do technically, but
they could use it, right?
Yeah.
But maybe a way
They'll
to think
spend
about
it. I guess I should say the IRS will spend it.
They'll find a use for it.
Yeah.
The Treasury needs it.
Right.
But another way to think about it, the estate tax rate is 40%, right?
Right.
So if you direct anything to charity, right, 40% of that gift to charity is being paid by the Treasury, by the government.
Yeah.
So,
or if you do have a massive income gain in a year because of some other transaction, and you can reduce that by a large amount, take the nice charitable deduction. I mean, there's lots of ways that you can plan around that, so that charity gets money, you get a great deduction, and the money doesn't go or as much money doesn't go to the IRS, and you're usually happier, and the charity's happier, and you just made the world a better place. So
win-win.
That sounds like a win all the way around. Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for talking about that. The last kind of topic I want to kind of go into is, in a lot of these structures, how are these funded? Everybody always talks about life insurance as like this really bad. The word life insurance usually makes people, get all weird. But more so than trust. Yeah, it's even like I think I would put life insurance salesman probably a rung below the used car insurance salesman, maybe. Or they're like kindred spirits. But a lot of these structures, obviously there's lots of things that go into that, but how is life insurance used to help set up or fund some of these structures or keep continuity plans going and things like that?
That's a great point. So life insurance has there's a lot of uses for that, right? So we see it in businesses a lot with like a key man policy, right? You don't want the death of an important person in the business to jeopardize the business, right? So you see that a lot. When people are structuring it, maybe some people have heard of ILITs, which is an insurance trust.
Sure.
Same concept as before, where maybe if you have a policy, you'd want it to be owned inside of a trust so that the proceeds aren't subject to estate tax.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
The same way.
Yeah.
So you see that vehicle sometimes still. And generally, insurance or life insurance can be a great hedge and liquidity. So estate taxes is usually due, 9 months from the date of death, right?
Yeah.
There's different provisions in the code.
And the IRS does not take IOUs. They don't look favorably on those.
Nor do they take a property or, if you have a cattle ranch, they're not going to be like, oh yeah, you owe us 40% of your cattle. They're like, no, you got to liquidate that.
Yeah.
That's a real danger. And, something we're actively trying to help some clients with is that exact thing. Cattle, even in particular, you hit it right on. There is some provisions where you can maybe pay over time for certain family-owned businesses, but hey, when the taxes due, it would be nice to have, just a pocket of money that's
Right.
designated to address the tax
Yes.
and really take the sting out of it.
Or even at least, I know there's some, you can get even the IRS to the negotiating table to maybe if, you only have so much liquidity, they can get them be like, hey, why don't you take this and we'll call it good. They're not, I mean, I know I've heard situations where they're not totally unreasonable. I mean, because there's different ways you can evaluate things and all kinds of stuff. So if you can hand them a check and they're like, yep, that's good. We're good and even. There's a opportunity
maybe as negotiated, I suppose.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I'm not saying it works every time. I'm just saying there's
passive,
cash talks in lots of situations. So
for these situations, obviously you don't want the passive CPA either, because I know we've worked with some CPAs who are like, yeah, if you just cut the check, the IRS will take it. But if you're, if you are a little bit more aggressive and you come to the table and say, hey, we can do this in 9 months, or we could cut you this check right now, and they've been able to get the IRS to negotiate and just be like, you know what, yeah, money now is better. But you do have to have that CPA that's got a little bit more grit in them.
Yeah, or some of the tax controversy stuff to take care of that.
So.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to pre-planning, like we talked about in last episode. This one, pre-planning always wins, and at need or post-planning is usually you're just kind of trying to clean up the mess as best as possible. Yeah, the egg's already been broken, the milk's already been spilt. However you want, whatever analogy you want to use there.
Yeah,
the cat's been skinned.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do, but yes, earlier the better, more options and more time for it to work.
Yeah.
Start saving tax.
So again, for you higher net worth individuals, when you hear the word life insurance, please don't run away. It's a great liquidity tool, and it's a great way to include that again early into a estate plan to help mitigate some of those disasters that can come down the road.
And a good way to think of it is you're not buying it necessarily to just give to other people. You are buying it to cover your estate. So this is to make sure that your family, that your estate doesn't get totally depleted.
Right.
It is actually for you as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. So Jeff, just kind of recap. I mean, we've talked about some pretty gnarly stuff here. We've talked about BDITs. So again, what does that stand for?
That's the Beneficiary Defective Trust.
Perfect.
Yes.
And an IDGT.
Intentionally Defective
Grantor Trust.
Yeah.
You guys, all you guys listening, there's gonna be a quiz on this later. We talked about a GRAT, which is
that's the Grantor Retained Annuity Trust.
Perfect. QPRT.
It's the Qualified Personal Residence
Trust. Yeah, and those are actually really cool. If you have some asset protection issues, that's a great way to take care of that. Obviously, they have their limitations. Nothing's perfect. We talked about some charitable planning, which are your
there's the CRATs.
Yep.
And the CLATs.
CLATs, yeah. And those all
charitable lead and charitable remainder.
And all those different terms are basically kind of the similar trust structure. It's just really how they're set up and what the estate is trying to accomplish at that point, right? It's just, money now, money later. Are we doing income tax? Are we doing estate tax reductions? Or do we need money now? Do we need money later? Giving money to kids? There's all different ways to do that. So they're just different structures than what the person gifting the money is really trying to do, or what they're trying to accomplish.
And probably a good takeaway from this is, don't hone in. If you hear something that sounds, really cool, you're like, hey, the QPRT sounds really awesome. Don't hone in on one particular thing. Definitely go to whoever your legal counsel is and describe to them what you're trying to accomplish, because there's a ton we did not cover in this.
Yeah.
We did not cover law school in the last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So don't, absolutely take information from this podcast, use it and research it. But if you hone in on something, you might miss something that might be better. So definitely, if you're seeking legal counsel, describe to them what you want, what you need, your situation. Because there's, you probably have like 10 other acronyms you can spit off right now.
There are some more.
Yeah.
Twists and riffs on
all that stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because really, at the end of the day, I know you guys offer this crazy high level of concierge service. So if someone walks in and is like, I want a QPRT, you're not gonna be like, oh, well, let me start filling one out for you. That's probably not how it's going to work.
That literally happened 2 weeks ago. A client called. He said, I want to do a QPRT. And it turns out they really just needed some asset protection for their father. And, turns out he needed a lawyer in Washington to talk about fraudulent transfer stuff.
Right. Different stuff.
It's just the right technique for the right client.
Right.
And you try to keep an open playbook and hear what the client has to say.
Right.
Let it be a client-driven process.
Yeah.
We don't know what direction to take it. And
right.
You got to learn and hear what it's all about, and then just
I know you guys do a really, really good job at that too. So that's kind of what you want. Yeah. Perfect. So let's kind of wrap it up there. Jeff, any kind of closing thoughts, or what really, if there's something that you really want the audience to take away from today, what would that be?
I think it would be for business owners in particular. There is planning you can do now that will just the way you structure things, save estate taxes and get out in front of that without jeopardizing or changing the day-to-day life too much.
Right.
And it's just a matter of getting started in it and being proactive about the planning.
Yeah. I know for a lot of times people think, like, oh, lawyers are expensive, or this type of planning can be really expensive, but you're probably paying pennies on the dollar. I would say down the road. I've seen enough, just personally seen enough situations where the cheap planning now that seems expensive has saved thousands and thousands of dollars down the road. So get it done early.
Some of this plan, this is, no guarantees, of course.
Right.
But some of this planning, you are moving millions or 10 of millions of dollars with this kind of planning and, spending, of course, much less than that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. That $1 million tax bill to the IRS hurts. That's a painful check to write, or plus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nobody likes to write that one. Perfect. So again, as we always say, get that planning done early, start planning early, spend the pennies now to save the dollars later. Yeah. So Jeff, great stuff. How can our audience get a hold of you?
Sure. Thank you. So the firm is called GVM Law. We're here in Roseville, also offices in Napa Valley. We're on Douglas Boulevard. The website is gvmlaw.com. That's like golf, Victor, Mike, law.com. I'm Jeff Stevens, jstevens@gvmlaw.com.
Perfect. Yep.
Oh, Stevens with a PH, S-T-E-P-H, jstevens@gvmlaw.com.
Perfect. Well, Mark, you have anything else you want to kind of wrap up with?
No, really just, kind of hammering home again, the make sure when you're doing this kind of planning, because we talk, we've spoken to a couple attorneys and they all have different niches. Really make sure that you are telling them exactly what you want, exactly what you need, and let them bring the tools to you. Don't try and bring the tools to them.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Let the professionals do what they do best. So we're going to wrap that episode there. Jeff, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Mark, awesome job today. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So you want to check out our podcasts, hit us up. We're on our channel on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts. Download, subscribe, enjoy it. If you have questions or anything you want us to hear on future podcasts, please let us know. We have a huge stable of amazing people that we can get on here to answer your specific questions that you might need. And anything, and not just estate planning, but in the finance and CPA and legal world, we can get answers for a lot of those neat things that you might have. Business law, employment law, lots of cool stuff there. So please hit us up with those questions on Twitter, or hit Mark or I up on LinkedIn. We'll make sure we reach out to you and get those questions answered. Lastly, a quick disclaimer: anything said here should not be used as tax, legal, or financial advice. Please, before you make any decision, don't take it from this podcast. Go out and find a great attorney like Jeff or somebody at GVM Law. We have some other great resources. Please use those before you make any decision to make sure that you're making the best decision for you and your family. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful day.